Welcome to Kicks and Minivans, the podcast for dads who love sneakers. I am your host, KG. However you're watching and listening, man, we are glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in, hanging out with us for a little bit. Well, if you've been with us for the last couple episodes, you know we are in the coming to the end of a multi-week, multi-episode kind of mini-series where we've been talking about mental health and porn addiction. These are two of the toughest topics for me personally to talk about because they're two things that are a part of my story. But going back to 4 episodes ago, we started talking about the difference between shame and guilt, and then we had Rashad on to talk about porn addiction, and then we had the cast of the Embrace Mental Health podcast, Kelsey and Wes, to come on and talk about mental health. And this week we are kind of wrapping everything up with a guest, Brendon Coe, aka B-Coe, who he is a music producer, used to be rapper. I'd love for him to start rapping again because he's dope with it. But he is a beat producer. He's produced for some huge projects and artists that you would know, and is actually the producer of this beat that's in the background, the theme beat of Kicks and Minivans. And so very honored to have him come on. Asked him to join us because he had come back from a social media fast and came back really talking about his story of overcoming these two areas of mental health and porn addiction. And so hearing his heart come out and hearing his testimony, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to have him come on and chop it up for our audience. So I know you guys are going to love this conversation. Let's jump right into it. Well, Brendon, welcome to Kicks and Minivans. Thanks for joining me, man.
Man, thanks for having me, man. It's an honor, man. So, yeah.
I'm so excited, man. We've chopped it up a little bit, just about what this is going to be like, and I think the message that's coming out of this is something that impacts all of us either directly or indirectly. That either the listener themselves deals with this or someone that they know that's important to them deals with this. And so I think it's a crucial thing for us to be talking about. But anyway, before we jump into that, give us a little snapshot of you, your family, what you do, who you are. Tell us about Brendon Coe.
All right. Well, my name is Brendon Coe. I have a family of 6, 4 kids. My wife is Sarah. I love music. I love fitness. I love God, and just want to see people win, ultimately. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Pretty laid back, pretty chill, reserved, introverted, like to stay behind the scenes. Yeah, that's all I got.
Stay behind the scenes, but still one of the coldest rappers I've ever heard. So,
Yeah.
are you making? Because you say you came back on purpose. Like you came back, and the first video you posted in a while was like you dropping bars. So like,
Yeah.
Is that coming back, or was that just kind of like a one-off? Like I need to know. This is for me personally.
Yeah.
I need to know.
During I took some time off social media, and I did a lot of writing, a lot of digging and like soul searching, self-improvement. And I did a lot of writing, but I didn't necessarily want to come back and be an artist. I kind of use rap as a way to transition into sharing my testimony. So like rapping about real life issues, about, what I went through, but saying how social media affects us, or, if you get lost in the rabbit hole of it. So I guess yes and no. I just kind of write, but I don't desire to like put out an album. I mainly want to write to like help people out. Like, even if that's just like a short 16 or whatever that may be, maybe I can act out in a reel. So, but yeah, just to touch on real life issues. But it seems like people tend to listen more when you rap. So, I mean,
there's something about that. There's something about that for sure. You've come back with a message, and it's a message very much aligned not only with my heart behind this podcast and my story, but also, at the end of the first season of Kicks and Minivans, we kind of put it out to our listeners like, hey, what are the topics that you want to hear us talk about?
Yeah.
And it's the two biggest ones are the things that you've been posting about and talking about on social media. So I was like, yo, we have to have this conversation. So we'll get into that in a second. But this is Kicks and Minivans. So we always We always chop it up about sneakers. Are you a big sneakerhead? Where do you fall on that line?
I do like sneakers, but I never take time to buy them because I'm mostly in like chill attire. I kind of dress like a gym coach all the time, to be honest with you. I'm like wearing slides. I'm a slide guy. I do own. I see those Nikes back there. Those are hard, by the way.
I love one of my favorites, man.
I do have a pair of like all white Forces.
Okay.
But yeah, and Timbs in the fall time. I mean, yeah. I'm pretty bland. My wife, we went to church on a couple Sundays ago, and the pastor, like, he's like really chill, but his kick game is like super strong. And my wife was like throwing little subtle jabs, like, you need to take notes from pastors. So she's trying to, she's trying to like, yo, you need to get your kick game up. So
get your kick game up. It's expensive to buy into though. When you got 4 kids at home to feed, you know, that adds up really quick. But if you could have any pair of sneakers, like, is there a pair of sneakers out there where you're like, yo, if I could get any right now, regardless of the price, like, this is the one I'd go pick up?
Man, honestly, I haven't even thought about it, but I don't know. I'm a black shoe guy, so I would say probably black Forces, black on black Forces. Okay. Yeah, or like black Timbs. Yeah. So. Yeah,
there is something. Someone gifted me a pair of black Timbs a couple years ago.
Oh yeah.
And I had never even thought about buying a pair, because when you think Timbs, you just think the tans, right? And someone gifted me, and I was like, yo, it actually wore them a lot more than I expected. I would, you know. And I was just like, oh, this is kind of dope.
Yeah, it's pretty rare too. Like, you don't see them a lot. So
you really don't. And I don't know if that's because they're hard to get, or just people just don't think about getting the black Timbs like that.
I haven't even seen them in stores, so I mean, they could be rare. Either. So you may be lucky, man.
I might be. I might need to hold on to those, put them in a box. All right, so you mentioned, you know, you had gone ghost off social media for a little while. And when people do that, it usually means one of a few things. Either they're really struggling, they're doing really great, or they're turning a struggle into something great. Right. So what kind of inspired, because I think, like, I was going back and I saw, like, over the course of about 2 years, you only posted like a couple times. Over about a 2-year period. So, like, what inspired that break from social media? What were you up to back?
It was kind of a little of all of that. Mainly it was like, honestly, depression. I was going through this depression being on social media. There was a time where, like, I was getting like big accolades, and they were still coming from time to time, but they weren't coming as consistent. And, you know, the Instagram algorithm changed where it was harder to be seen. And I got to a point where I was feeling like a has-been, like, oh yeah, you were dope back in the day, but now you're not as dope. And I really started like wrestling, like, why does this matter so much? So I was depressed. Also, there were triggers on there. Like, you know, if you follow a bunch of fitness stuff, you're bound to see sexual stuff pop up. So that was a trigger, which led me to, I mean, if you're ready to talk about it now.
Hey, let's do it, man.
You know, battling with lustful thoughts, pornography, just a lot of stuff of that nature. So I decided just to get off of there and really just do some soul searching and check my mental health. I was like, yeah, this just isn't for me. And it was kind of hard to do because I'm like, this is my bread and butter. This is my career. Like, how am I gonna do all this? But yeah, that was pretty much the gist of it. Just to do some soul searching. I got into therapy. Still was lifting a lot. I even struggled with drinking behind the scenes a lot as well, which obviously I'm not proud to talk about, but the main one was, you know, it was just a lot in one. But basically, as you know, I began to like sit with myself truly and get to the root of why all this started. I felt like God was healing me, and he was like, yo, come back on social media. This is now your purpose to talk about these things. Because I was just like, man, I'm born. Have you seen Soul? The movie Soul?
No, I haven't yet.
Oh, I got you. So that movie is really good. I don't want to get into logistics, but basically I was like, I thought my purpose was like, yo, just doing music. Like, I knew what I was good at, but it wasn't my true purpose. Like, it wasn't like I was saving lives with making music. I mean, you can, but I felt like God wanted me to share more of that. Like, so that's why I got back on social media, because I contemplated like just deleting it in general, like never being on it again. But you know, God had other plans, and I was like, I'm just gonna come back, be raw. If I lose followers, that is what it is. If I get 2 likes, it is what it is. And you know, the validation piece was really important for me too. And one of the things that I struggle with was, not if I'm not being seen, then that means that I'm not dope anymore. So yeah, I don't know. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, that's, I mean, that's real and it's raw though. And I think there's so much we could dive into from what you just said, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where the best place to begin. I think, you know, hearing you talk about the validation piece of it, I wonder, because I first knew you as a rapper.
Yeah.
Right. And then you started stopping rapping and did more of the producing, the engineering stuff behind the scenes, which is, you said you like doing the behind the scenes work, right? Some people love being on the stage in the spotlight. Some people prefer to be behind the scenes. You said you prefer that. Was there a shift that happened when you stopped rapping? Because then you are more behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And so people not thinking you're dope, even though it's like, yo, anyone that's heard your beats knows you got it, bro. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know you got it, right? But like, was there a part of that? Like, did that impact that need for validation where you started feeling like, hey, I'm dropping off a little bit? Like, was it when you stopped putting yourself in the spotlight a little bit with the bars and the raps?
Yeah, it was almost like, cause I mean, I'm a words of affirmation guy. But I felt like I relied more on it as fuel to keep going. When really I didn't really love myself. So like, if I wasn't getting that constant, validation, I just felt like, oh man, I'm not dope. Like, even if I knew that I had the gift, I still was like, if people weren't responding to it, I was still like, oh man, I'm not dope, because nobody's saying, hey man, you're dope, you're dope, you're dope, you're dope. You know what I mean? So, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I feel like more people want to hear me rap more than listening to my beats, I guess. Or the beat was only dope if I rapped on it. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, I think it gives us a little bit of a glimpse, though, because I think, you know, as men, we want to act like we don't need anybody's validation. Yeah. Like we all want to seem like we're strong enough to not need, because if we need validation, that's weakness. Right. Right. And as men, like, we just don't want to appear weak. Like, that's just, and I think it's part of the culture. It doesn't give us grace and space to be able to show our weaknesses, right? Right, absolutely. And that need for validation. And dude, social media is just a fire for that. Like, because I'm like that too. I'm like, yo, I'll come up with a real idea. I'll be like, yo, this is a dope reel. And I'm like, 3 people liked it, and 2 of them are my wife and my mother-in-law. Like what? Like, what is this, man? I'm like, I thought this was the best. And then something else that I think was stupid gets, goes viral, gets 40,000 views or something. I'm like, why? Why? But social media is a fire for that. And I wonder so much, like, the link between social media and mental illness. Yeah. When people struggle with depression and anxiety, because, like you said, like, I'm super into fitness. Like, half of my feed is fitness stuff, right? Yeah. And then it's like fitness, NBA, and sneakers is like the majority of my feed on social media, right? Yeah.
And I'll wake up one morning, I'm like, yo, I'm feeling good. Like looking in the mirror, brushing my teeth. I'm like, yo, I'm feeling good. Like I feel like I'm in good shape. I'm looking good. And then I
Yeah.
open social media and I'm like, and this dude got like a 12 pack. Like all of
Yeah.
a sudden I ain't feeling good no more.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, I
Comparison,
can
man.
still pinch my belly fat, but he's got, you know, meanwhile, he's like eating 1,000 calories under his maintenance and probably miserable, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But like that's not what I see. What I see is like, yo, this dude's got a 12 pack and I ain't got that.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
and so it starts messing with my head all of a sudden. I'm like, yo, I ain't doing enough in the gym. I'm not cutting enough calories. Like, it starts beating me down,
Yeah.
feeling that as well. And so you got to wonder about like what the link is. So when you cut off of it, when you dropped social media, you stopped hopping on there, stopped scrolling. What did you see? I'm sure you felt like you got some time back in your life, but what did that do for your mental health when you cut that out?
Well, first of all, I started like loving myself again, gaining more self-awareness, getting closer to God. And it was weird because it was like, as I dropped it, it was like multiple things being cut off to where my desire for alcohol wasn't there. So it's easy to cut that off. My desire for, there was nothing triggering my lust. Like it wasn't there. Obviously you see people walking by, but I was able to like feed myself like positive things. So like, you know the scripture was like, feed your spirit. You're going to feed your spirit or your flesh. I started doing those things. And the more I did that, my mind was constantly on those things. And I don't know, man. There was something about journaling, because as soon as I got off, I started journaling each day, like how I felt. And I just felt happier, like not being on there, because I wasn't comparing. I wasn't looking for validation. I was more so sitting with myself, breathing, meditating, going to therapy. And I started just thinking about my whole entire life. And I got to the root of what that was. And you know, it was from obviously like my dad not being there, and I'll just touch on this right away.
Yeah, go ahead.
I started like with masturbation before adolescence. I don't know how, where it came from, but that was the thing that just robbed me from everything. I don't know what it is. It was just something that was like robbing me of purpose from not fitting into crowds growing up, not having a dad because he left at the age of 5. So that messed with my constant need of like needing validation. I jumped from school to school, got made fun of. So those were like other triggers that I had to sift through. Basically, I went down this whole rabbit trail when I got off social media. It took me all the way back to when I was 5.
Wow.
And that's the power of like sitting with yourself and avoiding all these distractions. Because, you know, like social media, it keeps us distracted. It's distractions at our fingertips. So, yeah, it's a lot, bro. Like we can talk about a lot. So it's just, yeah. So
I think that's so powerful because we don't allow ourselves to be bored.
Exactly.
Right? In the 21st century, like there's no reason anyone should ever be bored.
Right.
And like I think boredom can be a great tool.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, and
it's
like
healing and boredom.
I remember, yo, it was crazy. I did not to your extent, but like I cut off social media for a month here and there, you know, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna drop off these. I swear, like the first day I cut social media off, I checked the weather like 80 times. Cause I'm like I gotta get on my phone and do something. I'm like, I'm gonna go check the weather, and I'm like, it is 90 degrees in Cancun right now. Like I'm just like I didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
But like you, it's like, you know, you start just sitting with yourself. I started praying more. I started getting into the word more, and
wow.
I think like we don't allow ourselves to be bored, and thus we don't allow ourselves to just be with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And really reflect about who we are. And I think that's something that's missing in people today.
Absolutely. I was looking up studies. I don't know if you heard of Andrew Huberman, but he's a neuroscientist, and he works with a lot of the people at Stanford University, and they do these studies, and a lot of reasons why people are depressed being on social media is because it's like a constant dopamine hit. So it's like when you train your mind to constantly, like when you're scrolling on social media and you're just on there, it's like a never ending novel. Like you're not going to stop. You're not going to get to the end point. It's just mindless. There's no end point. So what happens is you have these dopamine hits and you reach this big peak. And when it's done, you don't go back to baseline, you go below baseline. And that's why a lot of people are depressed. So you got that, you got them comparing themselves to others, you got them feeling like they're not being seen. And it's like, that's three things right there of like what can cause depression. But then we, like I said in the bars, it was like, we're wondering why we're depressed. Like this is one of those reasons. So that's just a few of them. Because it's like, if you're not feeling good about yourself, like you said, or if you're feeling good about yourself, like, hey, man, I'm starting to look good. And you get on Instagram
Right.
and, you know,
Right.
this
There's
dude got a
always
12
someone that
pack.
looks better.
Always. Or if, you know, your car is broken down and you got your wife yelling at you and you get on there and you see Johnny just bought a new car. It's like,
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Or you
man.
just go to church and she's like, hey, the pastor got some sneaks, man. You gotta.
You know? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I think one of the things you had said in one of your reels recently that was just really powerful and kind of punched me was because I say all the time, I'm not raising boys, I'm raising men. Right? I got 2 little boys. And I say, I'm not raising boys, I'm raising men. And you said in one of yours, you said, I have to teach them how to be a man when I don't feel like a man myself.
Yeah. And
I thought that was so powerful. And I think a lot of people could hear that coming from you and be like, what's he talking about? Because what we see is on social media.
Yeah.
And what we see on social media is the surface level stuff, right? And so people might look at B-Coe and be like, dude, he's making these hits. He's producing for top artists, collabing with these top artists. He's getting placed on shows. Like, the dude's jacked. And, like, they're like, what's he got to complain? Like, what's he talking about? Like, he's just tripping. Like, what causes you to think like that? And why is that different than how people might just perceive? How is reality different than what people just might perceive?
Yeah, I think when I was like, you know, posting all those things, like, you know, you see highlights. That's all like a lot of social media is. Like, you're just posting your highlights, but you're not giving the full story. So they just see headlines and like, oh, wow, this dude's life is awesome. He's balling in money. But truth be told, I really wasn't necessarily balling in money. Like, there was some nice change, but I was still obviously dealing with depression and, you know, not having a dad. Like, that's like that's like the one reason for me not to feel like a man. I just didn't feel, you know, feeling whole myself or like having self-doubts about myself. But then still trying to raise kids. And God is funny, man, because it's like I'm scared to have a son because I got to teach him how to be a man. And God's like, yo, boom, here's 3 sons. So I'm about to literally use your weakness to show you your strengths. Stay in my word, learn yourself, learn how to pray at all times. And this will, as you're healing, you're going to teach them how to be a man in their way along their journey. Because that was the scary thing is I started to see some of the things, because, you know, like we can pass down generational curses. You know, my father, like I said, I didn't mention it on here, but I hung out with him one time. He used to drink a lot, and he passed out drunk one time, and I was at his house, and I wanted to watch cartoons, and I knew he had Dalmatians at his house, so I'm like searching for Dalmatians. I end up finding a pornographic tape, and that was the beginning of my addiction. So that was literally passed down to me physically and I guess spiritually, you could say too. So yeah, I started seeing things in my kids, like them not having self-confidence, because I didn't have that self-confidence, and that started to scare me. So I was like, I need to cut everything off now, truly get healed, not just stop it, but truly dig deep to what happened in my past, go to therapy, whatever I got to do. Because yes, obviously I accepted Christ, but I still needed to do the self work. So like now I'm able to teach them from a place of healing. So like if I already did pass it down, that will get snatched out as I'm trying to teach them. And God kind of gave me this boldness to have the confidence to raise them. So now I feel prepared. Even I still have my struggles and not feeling like a man at times, but I lean back on that testimony. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Yeah. The generational curses is so true, and we have the power to pass them down.
Yeah.
But we also have the power to say it stops here.
Absolutely.
Today.
Yes.
Like this is the end of the line for that.
Yeah.
Like this will not continue into the next generation. Like every dad listening has the power to end generational curses.
Absolutely.
And I think we all should want our kids to start like their adult life in a better place than us.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think like one of the easiest places you could see that is like in finances, right? Like I graduated college, like not in a terrible spot, but like I had student loan debt, a car debt, like all that stuff. I'm like, yo, my kids are going to graduate. They're going to be debt free. If they choose to go to college, they're going to go through that debt free. Like they're going to have savings and no debt and a great understanding of financial literacy by the time they're 18, 21,
Yeah.
And like that's an easy way to say like, hey, this is how it's going to change for the next generation in my family.
Yeah.
But that's across the board. Like I want them to learn about these issues and be real with them about because we were chopping it up on the phone before recording, and I'm like, yo, your story with depression, porn addiction, I'm like, that's very relevant to my story, and these are things I struggle with as a pastor. Right? I'm a youth pastor, and I'm struggling with these things, and it took me years to come out about the depression struggle. And I was met with love in my congregation from talking about that, and lots of grace. But I never really came out to anyone about my pornography struggle that was in my church, because that was something I could have been fired for. Like straight up, and but when you read it, it's like I think it's more than 50% of pastors struggle with that.
Man.
But if all their friends are in the church, right? Like what you gonna do? Who you gonna talk to?
Right.
Because I'm sure you would agree, like accountability, like letting someone else in to know about that struggle is like the key. At least for me, like that was the key.
Man.
Satan loves these things to stay in the dark. If you are struggling with mental health, he loves for you to struggle with that by yourself. If you're struggling with pornography, he wants you to struggle with that. Like truth be told, Satan doesn't want your wife to find out you're struggling with porn. Like that's like your biggest fear is your wife finding out. That's Satan's biggest fear too. He don't want your wife finding out. Right? Like he wants that growing in the darkness. For so many of us, it's like, especially if you're a pastor listening to this, like, and you're struggling with that, like, you have to find somebody you can let into that.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I had to go to a friend that I really like barely knew. Like we were friends, but we weren't super tight. But he was someone I knew and trusted outside of my church. Yeah. But that moment of vulnerability sparked a friendship, and now he's my best friend. Wow. And so it's like that opened up the door for our friendship to grow out of that, Yeah. But like, we have the power to either continue those generational curses or stop them. Yeah. End them. Yeah. So as you were doing work over the last couple of years, how much did the childhood stuff play into the depression, the porn addiction that you struggled with as an adult? Yeah. Like how much of that was linked all the way back to childhood, you feel like?
I feel like all of it, man. I feel like all of it, like, cause it was like a 20-year thing, man. Like I said, I don't even know how I did. I mean, I had situation where I was almost molested as well. So it's like, you know, you think about the Bible. It talks about all other sins are outside the Bible, but the sexual immorality is, and I know that's talking about laying with another woman, but I feel like even the masturbation was that. Like, it was just, I don't know, man. I just felt like it played in my whole life. And just to be totally honest, I don't know if you heard about the whole no fap thing on YouTube and semen retention. I don't know if you've ever heard about that whole movement. So
No.
there's like this scientific thing, like if you like hold your seed and retain your seed, like you'll be more focused, you'll be more spiritual per se. And there was like a bunch of people across the board doing this, saying I felt spiritual. Like there was like Muslim universe people, all this other stuff. So I was like, hey, I'm going to try it, because this is one of the things I want to break off my life. I don't want this to control me. And I even, you know, my wife agreed to do this 21-day fast for me. Because, you know, 1 Corinthians 7, like, don't deny your conjugal rights to your wife, whatever. So she was on board. So we did this fast. And at this time, I got so, the depression linked back to my childhood was so bad. I got to the point to where I was like almost like agnostic almost. So I was like, I want to break this addiction. I said my prayers and stuff like that, but I was just like, I want to do this. And in the moment when I did this fast, I found this healing, and God literally said, he literally said, this is why you can't hear me. It's because you've been doing this. And like, it just was like, I don't know. I can't explain it, but the science behind it just, because it wasn't that he wasn't forgiving me. It was me not forgiving myself, which I was blocking my way from hearing him. So, I keep going on these rabbit trails, man. Sorry.
No, you're good, dude.
But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, all the way from most of my life, like 20 plus years of my life, I felt like I wasn't operating who I was. And that's why there was this excessive need for validation. Ever since my dad left and me picking up the struggle of pornography, like that was just my whole life. Like I knew what I was good at, but I didn't know what I was doing with my purpose. So until like now, I'm a 33-year-old man, and now I'm just like, so I don't need the validation now. It's still nice to get nice words, but like I said, I know some people are like, what is this dude doing? He's coming back on social media and he's like preaching or like sharing all this information. And some, like I said, one thing might get 2 likes, but now I don't. I know what I'm doing. If it sets one free, gets people thinking, sets men free, that's a win. If it breaks generational curses, that's a win. So
right. And it's a daily struggle that I have to do in reminding myself of the purpose of things, you know, because I posted a reel like a week ago where I was like, yeah, we post our highlights, but like here's some setbacks that I feel like I faced this week, right? Like I attempted a PR on the bench and failed in front of my wife. Right? Like she was spotting me, right? Because I have a home gym, so it's like she's the only one there besides my 3-year-old. But I'm like, yo, the struggle of that wasn't that I failed my PR. Like, it's that I failed it in front of my wife.
I feel that.
Right? Like, I'm like, that's embarrassing. Like, I'm disappointed, but like, that's embarrassing too. Right? But I'm like, I'm disappointed in these things. And it's like, we can have that disappointment. I forget where I was going with that.
It's okay, bro.
That's something I was coming on to.
I do that all the time. That's good.
See, I'm starting the rabbit trail now. I feel like that's what most of podcasting is just a series of rabbit trails, you know? So you've talked about, you know, the depression and the pornography specifically being, you know, 2 of your biggest struggles. And that's been the case in my story as well. Where are you at in terms of like freedom versus bondage to those things, right? Like, is it this, if it's like, is it like a scale of like 1 to 10 where like 1 is bondage, 10 is freedom, and it's like you're somewhere on there? Like for you personally, where, because I feel like for me, where I am today versus where I was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, like I am closer to freedom, but I also feel like these are things that it's like, hey, I could go years without looking at something online. Yeah. But I feel like it's always going to be a temptation. Yeah. That when I get stressed out or lonely or angry, like that's one of the vices that my mind will be like, yo, that'll fix it. That's even real. If it's been years, right? That's real. So like for you, how does that spectrum work for you, that bondage to freedom thing? Yeah.
I think I go back to, because just to be totally honest with you, I'm up there right now at 9 or 10. Since I finally have let it go, and my wife being on board with knowing about, what I'm trying to do, and then the whole retaining my seed, it almost kind of repaired my way of like how I view women. So when I see a woman, I see a woman. I'm not like looking there. Obviously, there's still going to be temptation, but I choose not to dwell on it. And like I said earlier, like I'm constantly feeding my mind on the Word of God, like on the Bible app. I know it sounds cliche, but like on the Bible app, I'm literally trying to, like, they have the Word of the day. So like I'll literally try to meditate on that all day. So like another thing I didn't realize is, we knew about this, but we really didn't know about it. I've limited my, not limit, but I haven't watched anything that involves sex. I haven't listened to anything that involves sex, because like throughout the day, whether we're listening to something that's triggering that, whether we're on social media and something's triggering that, it feeds our desire to want to do that. Like we're already going to have that temptation, but why are we going to feed something that is just going to make you go home later? Like, yo, this will feel good. All the coping mechanism has to offer is just making you feel good. And then when you're done with it, you don't feel good. You know what I mean? Right. So like nobody watches it and says, yo, I'm about to go conquer the world. You know what I'm saying? But
no, you're right though.
But yeah, I would say being mindful of, I just went on rabbit trail again, but be mindful of not feeding it, because the temptation's already going to be there. But yeah, just being mindful of not feeding it in those ways, whether you're listening to something, whether you're scrolling on something, or music. Because I had times where I was like, yeah, music don't affect me. I'm going to put Drake on. I'm going to put 21 Savage on. You know what I'm saying? But realistically, it was affecting me. And since, and I'm not trying to be so legalistic, but it's freeing knowing that, like, yo, I actually enjoy myself after being in bondage so long. I now know what triggers it. So it's like, I'm going to do the opposite of what triggers it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, the mind is just like any other part of our body, right? Like you and I are both into fitness. Like I've had these back issues plaguing me since I was 21 years old. And like, I've gotten to a point now, I'm 33. It's like, I know what's going to trigger it. Right. And I know the warning signs that something's about to snap back there. And so it's like, there's times now where it's like, when I was 25, I'd just push through a workout. Even if I heard the warning signs, I'd push through, but then I'd throw my back out and then I'm out for 2 months, you know? Man. But now I'm like, I'm wise enough. I pay attention enough. I listen to my body enough to say like, hey, I can feel this. My back's about to go out. I need to cut it for today. I need to do some stretching, you know, get away from that and fix it. And it's the same way with our mind, man. Like I was just in my men's small group last night, I was just talking about like, I'm a 5 a.m. workout person. And I can't do the podcast or sermons at 5 a.m. when I'm working out. Like, God bless you if you can. If you're listening to this while working out, like, praise God for you. But I'm a music. I need my hip hop when I'm working out. And aside from CHH, Christian hip hop, if I'm gonna listen to any music while I'm working out, it's like 2000s hip hop and R&B. Yeah. right? And it's like, yo, there is like not a single non-sexual song that came out in the 2000s, bro. Like, it is all raunchy. And I'm like, yo, this is the stuff we was listening to at 15, 16 years old. Like,
Man.
like, what was we doing? Like, but it is amazing. I have noticed a vast difference in my days when I'm listening to the KB, the Lecrae, versus when I'm listening to Akon.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like all day long, like that is the if I'm listening to 2000s R&B during my workout, hip hop, like that is a temptation that day.
Yeah.
Like I already know, like it's gonna be on my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be sending my wife flirty texts all day long.
Man.
Like,
yeah.
Because like it's gonna be on my mind all day. Right? But it's like, yo, there's something edifying to my soul when I choose to filter what I allow into my mind.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're trying to put like this childish filter on it. And it's like, listen, man, like the enemy knows he is seeking to steal, kill, and destroy, and he knows how to get at us, man. And just like we was talking about on the phone yesterday, it's like with all these streaming services now, you know, no one's watching cable anymore. They're watching Netflix or HBO Max or Disney Plus, and it's like, yo, they ain't got no filters on nudity on there.
No.
Right? Like, I remember trying to watch one of the Marvel TV shows when it first came out on Netflix, and it was like the first episode had like 2 or 3 sex scenes, and I was like, yo, I gotta cut this off. Like, this is not good for my soul right now.
Everywhere.
To be watching this, you know? And so we really do have to filter what we allow into our minds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, man. It's everywhere, man. And we were talking about too when we were on the phone, like how easily accessible, like, I mean, you already said it, but
oh my gosh,
you know, back in the day you had to work hard. I mean, this kind of shows our age, but back in the day we had to, you know, work hard. It was like magazines, or you had to buy a thing, and now it's easily accessible, like even to the kids. Like there was times where I wouldn't even get on TikTok because stuff was, you know, popping on there, and I figured out you can change your algorithm, like so. But yeah, man, yeah, you really can. And I think for me, at least, it is important to set those guardrails and know what triggers you. You know, absolutely.
Like, you know, I got a buddy that like he can't watch stuff that's too violent. Because it'll send him into a dark place, and I'm like, I can watch all sorts of violence, like I can watch John Wick. Like I love revenge movies, bro. Like I love that kind of stuff. Like, but I got friends that can't watch that stuff because it sends their spirit into a dark place, and I'm like, I can't watch stuff with too much of that stuff in it. You know what I mean? Like the nudity. Like I can't. Like there is a filter. There is a limit for me where I'm like, yo, I gotta cut this off. Like I can't watch this because it's gonna mess with my soul. And that's not just being childish, that's being wise.
Right. Absolutely. In
what we allow to enter into our mind.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We talked for a little bit because, you know, when we ended season 1, we said like, hey, what are the issues you want us to talk about on season 2 of Kicks and Minivans? And the 2 top answers by a lot were mental health and pornography.
Yeah.
And I felt like I shied away from those topics in the first season because they're extremely personal for me.
Right.
And so they're hard for me to talk about.
Yeah.
But clearly there is a need.
It is.
And it's not being talked about as much in guy circles.
No.
And I think part of that is just the appearance of weakness, the vulnerability piece. But like, as you've come back to social media, specifically talking about like these 2 issues for men, like why? What is it that's stirring in you to say like, hey, these things need to be talked about?
Well, one is just like, it's painful, man. It's painful to come out and talk about it, but it lifts this burden up that is just tremendous. If anything, it makes you more of a man to talk about it and like share it. But I did that in that video you seen where I was sharing my testimony. It was so funny that night. I got attacked in my dream with a sexual dream. I was like, "What are the?" You know, so clearly he didn't want me to talk about that. But all in all, it's just freeing because men deal with this and they'll take it to their grave without like it robs you of walking in your true purpose and like hearing from God ultimately. And it's not that God isn't speaking to you; it's that you're still covered in this guilt and shame of what you're doing because you're holding on to this secret sin. Like in James 5, it says, confess your sins to one another. And that's one of the biggest ones that most men are dealing with. So it's like, if we can get more men to talk about it, we can get more men healed. You know what I'm saying? And men can then lead their families and be the priests of their home. And yeah.
Come on.
But yeah.
And what you said, there's so much shame tied around these two topics in particular. Like there's so much shame. And my pastor at my last church that I worked at, Mark, who's just a good friend and mentor of mine, he always says guilt is different than shame because guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad.
Ooh.
And like the enemy will just put that into us. And it's like, yo, that's been me, man. Like, as I'm like pastoring teenagers, and I got parents like, hey, I found my kid's phone and he was looking up this stuff. Like, you need to talk to him. And I'm sitting there like,
that's heavy.
I have to say yes to that. But what the heck am I going to say? Because I was on my phone last night. Like,
oh, man.
You know, and so like, that just dug me in this grave of shame and hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And not having anywhere where I could go to talk about it, you know?
Yeah.
But that shame, man, will just keep us hidden in it because it tells us that we are bad.
Yeah.
But I love what you said, too. Like, it's not... That vulnerability isn't weakness. It actually takes strength to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we believe this lie that... And it might not be a lie. It might be because we've been vulnerable in the past and that was weaponized. Against us, right? Because that's been part of my story, and that's why it's so hard for me to be vulnerable today.
Wow,
and it's taken me a long time. It's taken me a long time to be able to like get to a point where I will now open up to my wife about anything and everything. And it might not be right away, but she knows that like I just need a moment, collect my thoughts, and then like I'll come to her with whatever it is. And it's like she knows at this point, like just give me a little bit of time and I'll open up. But it's like that has been, my vulnerability has been weaponized against me in the past. And I think a lot of men can relate to that.
Absolutely.
If they've been vulnerable before and it's been weaponized, we shut down immediately.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for you, how have you seen vulnerability play into healing?
No, when you said that, it literally made me think of why it took me so long to open it up. Like, it's easy to open up about it when you feel like you finally have overcome it. But for a while, I wasn't open about it because I remember being in close circles and people wouldn't open up about it because they still wanted to be on the stage. But I was like, we're here for the same reason, for the kingdom of God. We all want to be healed and transparent. And left me in the cut, even though I knew some other people were dealing with this too. So that's a whole different that's a whole different podcast. But I think finding that one person that you trust, like you said, your one friend, and just, opening up to them. Therapy really helps. Don't sleep on therapy. I know it can be expensive, but you find the right therapist, you're able to sift through some of those things. But being vulnerable with the right person is a game changer. And you might have to try again. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Wow.
So,
and it takes strength to try again.
Yeah.
And let me say this. 2 things about what you just said. One, don't give up if you have one bad therapist. Because I think it was like my 3rd or 4th therapist that I went to that finally was the one that clicked for me.
Wow.
Like it took me a long time. And it took, my pastor saying like, you need to go to this guy. Like, this guy would understand you. And I mean, like, dude, the stuff that he helped me walk through, like, so much of it was linked to my childhood, and I never put that together until I was sitting in his office every week, you know? So don't give up if you have one bad therapist.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, try again.
Yeah.
You know? But also, you know, when you say, like, having at least one person to be vulnerable with, 100% agree, but it needs to be one person besides your wife.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
Look, your wife should know what you are struggling with.
Right.
Right? But she can't be the only one to know.
Yeah.
Like, that's not fair to her. Like, you need another man beside, like, and don't open up to another woman about it. Like, please do not.
Please
don't be like, KG said, go talk to my wife and her at work. You know, like, not that. Like, find another man, a pastor, a friend, like someone that you trust that you can be honest and vulnerable with.
Right.
Because your wife should not have to be the only one to bear that burden. Right. That is not fair to her, and she should be there to support you, but she can't be carrying that load alone, man.
Yeah.
That's not fair to her. But
yeah, absolutely.
I know it's getting late for us here as we're recording. I don't want to hold you too much longer, but man, I feel like we could just continue chopping it up. I do want to ask you about this though. What do you think? As you talk about depression and pornography, how are those two struggles, how do you see them linked for you? Because for me, it was one that, like, depression would lead to the porn, and the porn would lead me further into depression. And it was just this cycle that dug me deeper and deeper. What is the link for you? Like, was there a link between those two? Were they two kind of separated things?
No, they were definitely the same thing. Because like I said, I dealt with a lot of rejection growing up. You know, obviously my mom and my dad split at the age of 5, and, you know, I found that tape like I was telling you, but then I went to like 3 different middle schools down south. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and all those, you know, they say you find your identity in middle school. My mom didn't dress me the best, so I got made fun of. So that was other rejection because my dad didn't show me how to dress. So like all that fueled my depression. And like you said, you look at pornography, it's like this vicious cycle. And like you said, like when you get into ministry, you're leading people, but then you're still dealing with this. You ended up worshiping out of your struggle versus worshiping being free. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, they just cycle each other. You got depression from the shame. You get depression from not getting enough validation. You get this, it's a vicious cycle. So, but that's
been the same for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people listening. And so you, just one or two more quick questions. You said you're up at a 9 or 10 on the freedom scale right now. Is that like every day you feel up there? Because like there's some days where I feel up there, right? And then today, I told you before we started recording, I'm like, yo, I almost canceled with you because my mental health was like a 2 today.
Yeah,
like,
way to persevere, bro.
It was just a bad day, bro. Like, just straight up, it was a bad day. Yeah. Like, how often does that fluctuate for you with where you're at right now?
It's to be honest, it's really hard to say because I feel like honestly such a spiritual high, and then I know I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to answer because I feel like right now I'm on this spiritual high again, like when I first came to Christ. So like obviously I still get down, but I'm this is gonna sound cliche, but I've been more conscious about praying every single praying without ceasing. So like yeah, I guess I don't know how to answer that because I haven't even thought about doing it other than, you know, the dreams happening. Because what would happen is I would have a long streak and then I'll have a dream and I'll keep meditating on that dream and then I end up falling again. But now when I have the dream, I'm just like, I don't believe that. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, man. I don't know if you can cut this out or what, but yeah.
No, I'm not cutting it out, man.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had an answer for it or not. You know,
Yeah.
and I feel like there's definitely seasons where it's like, yo, I'm probably usually up at like an 8, where I'm like, this is always something knocking at my door, and
Yeah.
I have to consciously fight against it. Like, and I don't know, like, I do feel like I'm in a season and a spirit of freedom.
Yeah.
But I'm like, freedom with my sword still drawn.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Absolutely.
you know, and I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, hey, I always have to be conscious of this,
Yeah.
because I feel like it's when I'm not being conscious that those thoughts can enter into my mind. So what, last question I want to ask, what are some things that you do? Obviously we talked about, like, hey, vulnerability, and other things can lead to freedom. If there's anything else that you would say that we haven't talked on that you would say led you to freedom, I want to hear that too. But what are you doing in the day-to-day to keep yourself in that spirit of freedom?
Yeah, so to keep me in that, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, but like if there is this strong desire to do that, I'll literally put on a podcast and I'll find something to do. Like I like doing laundry sometimes and doing listening to podcasts. So like if I'm feeling a certain way, I'll try to like take the energy that I want to use for that and I'll literally transmute it into something else. Or like I'll go outside and run, or I'll go out the house and walk. Cause like the power of being outside, it just kind of does something for you. Or like going in the woods or going out in public when I have that desire. And I know some people will be like, oh yeah, well when you get back, you still got to face it. But like, no, just like go out as long as you need to, say a prayer, try to fill up on something else, watch something that talks about, I mean, I don't want to be like, hey, you're going to go to hell if you do it, but like watch something that talks about men who struggle with this and how they overcame. Like for every there's always a way out. I mean, we just got to believe that it's a way out. And when you feel like you're weak, you're really strong. You just have to find a way to transmute that energy. Fitness is a big one. Fitness really helps out a lot to overcome that. But yeah, I guess that last question you asked me, it was kind of hard to answer because I do feel like in the season of freedom, and obviously like it can be like this, things comes in waves, but just choosing not to go back to 20 years of slavery, it just doesn't seem like an option. And it's like remember the things that God delivered you from. I think thinking about those things, like even though you may not feel delivered yet, think about the things he has delivered you from, and, you know, meditate on his testimonies, meditate on his word. You know, we say pornography is on the internet, but there's a bunch of groups of men who have overcome this. So we have no excuse not to overcome it. There's groups out there. You can look up semen retention, no FAP. Like there's a bunch of stuff out there and talks about the science of this stuff too and how it affects our brain. But you know, God has his reason. You know how God will tell us not to do something in the Bible, but there's also scientific facts to back certain things of why he says not to do it.
It's amazing how much science backs up what's said in the Bible sometimes. And something my pastor here in Indiana at Traders Point has said in a sermon multiple times is, he says, every struggle in the Bible, God will tell us to stand and fight. He's like, stand in the ring with Satan, go toe to toe and fight him.
Yeah.
Except for issues of the sexual nature. It's the only time he says run, flee.
Don't go nor the doorstep.
Do a 180. Don't fight this thing. Run from it.
Wow,
right?
Bro,
And so, and then it's like, there's a book called The Solomon Seduction, right? Where it talks about Solomon being the wisest man that ever lived. But what was his trip up? Women. He had 1,000 women, bro. Like, and so, you know, and you look throughout the Old Testament, all these heroes of the Bible, you know, Samson, strongest man that ever lived. David, holiest man that ever lived. Solomon, wisest man that ever lived. What was all their downfalls? Women. And so if you were saying this is something you can fight, you were saying you were stronger than Samson, holier than David, and wiser than Solomon. That's why God tells us this isn't something you fight, this is you run from it. And so I love, like, it might even sound corny, but like redirect the energy somewhere, whether that's a workout, folding laundry, go run errands with the kids, like something like, have those people you invite into your life.
Your why is important, because one of the biggest, like I said, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do it is because I didn't want it to be passed down to my kids. So it's like, it was bigger than me. It was not only for my own freedom, but it was like for others around me, you know? So we have destiny, and that's one of the things to rob men from destiny. If it's all in the Bible about Samson and David, clearly there's powerful men. You're a powerful man, and don't let these things trip you up. And I love what you said, run, because I was reading Proverbs 5 the other day, where it's talked about don't even go near her doorstep, and that's so many things. Don't click on that page. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't even entertain that conversation with the pretty moms at school in the pickup line. So don't use pickup lines in the pickup line. Anyways, that's a bar.
That's a bar right there. Come on, man. Shoot, man. Yeah, that's so powerful, especially when you talk about the breaking of generational curses and how you physically, like, you have a physical representation of, you know, finding that tape in your dad's collection, right? And so breaking those generational curses, especially like raising 3 boys for yourself, raising 2 boys myself, you know, like, that has been like a fear of mine, is like, my sons will inherit this struggle. And that's a big why for me of why I was gonna say why I want to fight, but why I want to run, you know, is like, I don't want my boys sharing that story. You know?
Wow.
That why is so important, man. Well, bro, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been such a rich conversation. We might have to have you back to chop it up more on this, man, because this is
absolutely, man. Thank you, man. Seriously,
you might need to start your own podcast to chop it up about this stuff, man, because this is...
Yeah, I just got too many rabbit trails, man, so forgive me if I didn't answer any. This is how my mind is, but yeah. Thanks, man.
Dude, like I said, I feel like that's podcast a lot of times. There's a lot of rabbit trails, but yeah, man, powerful story. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks, man. You take care, man. Love on the family.